So guys, how you doing today? Thought maybe it might be fun to show you something I like to do in the spring, getting ready for fishing. I'm going to show you a jig that I like to make, and maybe show you how I use it. First of all, let's back up. I got to tell you, I am boring when it comes to bass fishing. I enjoy my bass fishing. I do a lot of it, but I try and do it for the least amount of money possible. I don't like spending a whole lot of money on it, so therefore I kind of go to a few places that I like, and I have a few techniques that I really enjoy. I like fishing for the bites, so things like jigs and worms where the fish pick it up and run with it are better for me than crankbaits or swim baits, although I'll throw those too sometimes. But what I'm going to show you today is it's a grass jig, or some people call this a swim jig. It's exactly the same jig head that you'll find on an Alabama rig. And I got where I like to use this, I don't know, 20 years ago. Strike King, I think, had a product out they called a finesse jig, and it went up to about a 1/4 ounce jig head. And what it made it different, I guess, from most of the other jigs on the market is that it had a titanium wire weed guard. And I really liked the hookup ratio I would get with that weed guard compared to the old plastic brush style weed guards you find on a lot of jigs. And I found it to be, pretty weedless. It came through particularly wood cover and sticks really well. And then as things happened, Strike King decided, I guess they weren't selling enough of those, so they stopped making them. And I started searching for a way to recreate that jig because I enjoyed fishing with it. So I looked and I looked, and I found what I found, and the solution turned out to be, I ended up with some do-it molds. This one is called a casting jig, and it's model SMJ 3-SF, so it's SMJ-3-SF. I also have its bigger brother here, which is the MF. So this is probably small finesse. This is medium. At any rate, the sizes in here run from 1/8 up to a 1/4. The 1/4 inch size or ounce size is the one that I used to really like, and so that's the one we'll be pouring here today. And but I also will pour the larger. This goes up to a 1/2. I'll pour the 1/2, and most of the time when I pour the 1/2, I'll pour it without a weed guard on it, because I'm planning to use it as a swim jig head, and I'll put a bigger swim tail, plastic tail on it, and run it like a swim jig. Kind of takes the place of crankbaits in my box if I'm doing anything like that. At any rate, thought it'd be fun if we just followed the history of one jig, and I'm going to try and show you the best I can how this is done. Some of this is very small, and it's so it's a little technical. I'm not sure how good a footage I'll get here on the GoPro, but I'm going to do the best I can for you. So, at any rate, if you had a mind to do this, you'll need a jig mold. This particular jig mold takes a what's called a 60-degree hook, and this one happens to be the Mustad. This is a Mustad heavy duty. I like a heavy wire hook. This hook is pretty stout. I mean, you could probably land a whale on this without worrying at all. For this particular jig, I'm using the 3/0 size. For the swim jig, I'd probably use a 5. But at any rate, so you got your hook, you've got your jig. When I decided I'd start making these again, I decided I would use bismuth. So instead of lead, you know, the future's coming. They're going to take lead away from us eventually, so I thought I'd start making my stuff out of bismuth now and see what, getting used to it. It turns out that bismuth is a little, not a little, it's quite brittle. So in order to combat that, what I got was an alloy. This is 90% bismuth, I think, and 10% tin. So the tin's given a little bit of flexibility, a little less, and it's still pretty brittle, but I've poured a couple of test jigs, and I think these are going to work just fine. As a matter of fact, it turns out that when it comes time to trim it and stuff, that little, compared to lead that I used to pour, it turns out that little bit of brittleness makes it easier to clip and trim. So there's that. And it seems to be sturdy enough once we get it painted. I do not think we'll have a problem with them breaking on a rock or anything like that. But we're going to find out, because we're going to make a jig and we're going to paint the jig. By paint is a misnomer. We're actually going to be using powder coat, and then take it and catch bass on it, see how that works. So that's the plan, and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is get the wire under our hook, and this is by far the hardest part of this whole process. And when you see what I have to do, maybe you guys will think I'm crazy. But at any rate, you can always put the brush style weed guards in this. I just think that these work better, and so I go to the extra trouble to do this. So at any rate, what the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need a piece of titanium wire. This is titanium shark leader is what it is. And I only need, I don't know, maybe about 4 inches of it. I cut a little extra. I kind of look down here and try and get the ends about even and just cut it. I don't know if you saw that or not. Then, believe it or not, I'm going to take that wire and I'm going to tie an overhand knot in it. So I'm just going to take the wire and I'm just going to make one overhand knot in that wire, like so. And then I'm going to pull it tight and try and keep the knot in the middle of my tie, because it will want to move around on you. So I want to just pull it up a little bit, like so. And now I've got a loop in there. So then I'm going to take my hook, again 3/0 Mostad 60-degree heavy wire hook, and I'm going to slip my hook on. Now the wire is going to come somewhere around, you see that the degree, the little bend in the hook? I hope you can see that. At any rate, the wire is going to rest right about in that area. So I'll move that up there to the bend and grab a hold of it. And basically what I want to do is I want to hold the hook and the wire, and then I want to take a pair, in this case I'm using needle nose pliers, and I just want to grab a hold of the wires. Now, while I'm holding the hook, I want to pull that as tight around the hook as I can. I just want to pull that up tight. The main problem here is that the spring sense of this wire, it keeps wanting to spring back. So as you put it in the mold, it wants to jump out of, there's a slot where the brush guard should go. And so it wants to slide out of there. You got to try and prevent that somehow. So we've done that. We've pulled the wire up as tight as we can onto the bend. I'm sure you can't see that, but there it is anyway, just in case. And then I'm going to take, these are the smallest damn glass beads in the world. I bought 1 pack of these at my local fabric store maybe 10 years ago, and I'm still working on the same pack, so they go a long damn ways. At any rate, these very small wires There's very small glass beads. They have to be glass too, because if it's plastic, they will melt and burn in your jig, and that's not good. So you need glass beads, and they have to be small. And I'm going to put 1, 2, and this is easier said than done, by the way, especially when you're old and blind. 2, and usually I use 3. So 3 glass beads, and slide them up onto both strands of the wire. Now you're getting them onto the wire. Oops. And of course you will drop some like I just did, and I've probably dropped more of these than I've ever got onto my wire, but I still haven't run out. So there's the 3rd one on there now. And now I want to slide that up as close to the shaft of the hook as I possibly can. And basically what that's going to do is that's going to hold that wire in place for me, hopefully. Sometimes it's better than others, depends on the glass bead. This one's not wanting to cooperate too well, but there you go. What's new. And then there's one more step, basically, and that is this right here in my hand. This, you can never see it. This is actually the guts out of an ink pen that I took, and I rinsed all the ink out of it, and I cut it to match the inside of my. And basically that's going to fit in the groove where the wire, when you do them with the plastic brush guards, there's a thing called a retainer pin, and that pin goes in a slot to keep your lead or in this case bismuth from running out of your mold through this little hole. By little hole, I'll show you what I'm talking about. That little hole pipe right there. At any rate, what you end up with is a wire that looks like that on the hook, and then we're going to take that and put it in our mold. So what you end up with is hook in the mold, the glass beads, and then the piece of your ink pen. The surface, what's that going to do, like I said, is you're going to keep the lead from coming down this tube here, and basically it could literally run out onto your feet, and you don't want that. It's hot lead or bismuth, and you don't want that on your feet. So at any rate, that's what it should look like, something similar to that. And I promise you guys, you'll have to play with this yourselves to come up with a method that works for you. Took me a while. I poured several before it was ever okay, or ever I thought I was done. So at any rate, next thing you're going to need to do then is get yourself a torch. This one has an automatic trigger on it, so I fire it up and start her up. So you take your jig now in your mold, and you got to get yourself a ladle, and I've got my bismuth in the ladle. And I'm going to start to melt that bismuth on my torch, and while I'm doing that, I want to warm up my jig. You don't want to pour hot lead or hot bismuth, in this case, into a cold mold. It doesn't work out too good. Turns out this bismuth melts at slightly less temperature than lead. So it's going to be molten before lead would be, and lead moves, kind of quick. So at any rate, once you've got your lead melted, mold is warmed up, you're going to pour your mold, and then basically you just do that. Now remember, this is hot. Don't set this down on plastic. But at any rate, set that to the side and that'll just harden back up. We've waited maybe twice as long as we needed to, but that is already solid, and it's just now a matter of prying that out. She comes out looking something like that. At that point, we'll just go ahead and pull our little plastic tube from our ink pen off of there, and we'll go ahead and get our clippers, which I'm having trouble finding, little clippers. And this is just about how easy this bismuth wants to clip, which is just about like butter. That just clipped no problem at all. Sometimes you see that little roughness, I'll take a rat tail file to that sometimes and smooth it out if I'm really concerned about it, which I'm not at the moment. And then we're going to pull the last of our little glass beads off of that wire. Return those to our glass bead reservoir. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but that wire is a little longer than our hook. So basically what I'll do at this point is I'll try to shape it. Get a nice V right in the center of the hook is what I'm looking for. And it's usually, you don't have perfect. And then once I've got that, I'll pinch the two wires together, and I'll take my clippers and I'll clip them just a fraction above the hook point. I want like so. Now, as that comes through, that wire will catch whatever sticks you go over, and it will keep it weedless. And I think I get a much better hookup ratio compared to the old plastic brush guard type. At any rate, that's our jig right there, guys. We're gonna powder coat that here in a minute, and then we'll bake them, and I'll show you that process as well, and then we'll go out and catch fish with that. All right, let's talk about the painting process. It's actually powder coat. The product we're using is, get a good one here so you can see it, Protect powder coat. Comes in little jars like these. These jars go a long ways. I've never emptied a jar yet, so I don't know exactly how many jigs I can do out of one jar, but it's a lot. We're going to be doing our jig in a blue color because I think where we're going to take this jig to fish it, that is my most productive color, so that's what we're going to use. I've got multiples of colors, including colors that I make by mixing my own. Here's a old artichoke jar that I've mixed different colors into. That one comes out a burnt crawdad looking ruby red with flake color. At any rate, the process, we're going to need the jig, obviously, the paint. We're going to need this is actually it's a paint stripper. I know it looks like a hair dryer, but that is a Wagner heat gun, they call it. Don't use the torch for this because the torch is too hot. It'll melt the lead. This is hot, but it's not that hot. And as you saw, I have it taped to a chair so I can operate it with one hand. This is a rack that I've made out of a 2-gallon paint grid. So this is meant to go in a 2-gallon paint bucket, and I just bent it into a shape because after we've powder coated these, we're going to take them inside and bake them for 20 minutes at 300 degrees to set the finish and make it hard. If you don't bake it, it comes off, it stays pretty flaky. Anyway, we're going to take that jig, turn it blue, and then we're going to bake it. Excuse me, I want to show you before we started doing our jig. Kind of amazing thing. This powder coat really changes color when you heat it. This, I don't know if you can see it, medium gray looking stuff with a little blue flake in it, is going to be a very vibrant blue when we dip it. At any rate, okay, here's our jig. This is the one we're going to catch the fish on. Take said jig, and we're going to put it in a small pair of vice grips that I've adjusted so it'll hold it. This gets a little hot, and so you don't want to burn your hands. So there you go. Now I'm going to turn on our little gun. Now we're just going to heat the body of the jig. This gun doesn't get as hot as the torch, but it will eventually melt this bismuth if you hold it there long enough. So I just want to get it hot, and the powder coat will tell me whether it's hot enough or not. You just heat it up and then dip it straight into that powder that I showed you, and you can see it coming out almost black, right? And we're going to put it back in front of the gun and get it warm, or keep it warm, if you will. And then I'm going to go back into the juice again, and you can see it comes out all gray, and you can see the heat working on it. It starts to turn color right before your eyes. And we're going to do that one more time. So let's heat her back up. Do that one more time. And right back into the stuff. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and heat it up one more time. And you can see the nice bright blue that's starting to take on now. And that'll change even a little more as we bake it, which we'll show you here in a minute. Now at this point, I would normally take this little device that I've made out of an old jig, just a hook that I've straightened out, and I would clean the eye out. But as luck would have it, the eye on this one looks pretty good. We don't have anything to worry about there, so I'm going to skip that process. Then we're going to take our little homemade rack, and we're going to take our hook off of our vice grips, and we're going to take our little hook, and since it's hot, I don't want to touch any more that might be hanging on there at this point, but I'm just going to take that and hang it on that grid, and that's going to be ready to go in the oven. And so now we've taken our jig along with a few friends, and we've put it on our little rack that we made, and I do put a cookie sheet under it. My wife loves that part. Oven's been preheating now for a while. It's well, we'll double check here in a minute. It's supposed to be 350 degrees. I want it more closer to 300 with this bismuth because I'm worried about it remelting. At any rate, we're going to pop them in here. Set our timer for 20 minutes. I'm going to use my phone so I can move around and do other things. Alright, we're on for 20 minutes, and I'm going to double check this temperature. Back her down to about 300. Okay. Alright, well, time's up. Let's get these cookies out of the oven and see what we've got here. You want to be a little careful bringing them out of the oven because that powder coat now is hot and sticky, so if you swing them enough and they touch, you're going to have a problem. You're going to ruin the finish on them. So, at any rate, everything looks pretty good there. Have a look here. That's our jig down there on the far right bottom corner. And we'll let those cool now, and then we'll take them out and go catch fish with them. Next time you see this jig, it'll be on the end of my line. Well, there it is, the blue jig. just like advertised. What I didn't tell you is we're going to put a tube bait on this. I'll show you here in a second. So again, here's the part I didn't show you. A little blue tube, and I'm going to hook that up just on there. I really like just a tube bait on this jig. It ends up looking something like that. Let's go catch fish. Mission accomplished. Huh? Huh? All right, as advertised, guys, there it is. Hook in its mouth. Mission accomplished.